All right, we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. Today is August 2nd, 2022. This is the Office of Public Schools Construction Stakeholder meeting to discuss proposed regulatory amendments to allocate monies appropriated from non-bond sources. I'm Michael Watanabe. I'll be presenting today's meeting. With me today is Savannah Krusik from OPSC and Barbara Kampminer. A little bit for this meeting, I will walk through a background of why we're doing this, proposed changes, background of our changes and why we're proposing them. And then at the end, we can open up for discussion for anyone that has questions or comments on our proposed changes. This is a meeting format. We'll leave you on mute for now, but if you have a question anytime, feel free to raise your hand and we'll call on you and request you unmute to get your comments. This meeting was being recorded and transcribed, so it'll be available for anyone that misses the meeting on our website probably in a few days. All right, and with that, I will get started. If you haven't seen the item, it is posted on our website, on OPS website, on the meetings webpage under Stakeholder Meetings, and you'll see a link to the policy item. So it is there for you to follow along if you'd like to. So again, for this item, we're proposing regulatory amendments to amend the fund release process for funds made available to the school facility program outside of general obligation bond sales. With the passage of Assembly Bill 181 a few months ago, the program was provided $1.3 billion from the state general fund for the 2022-23 fiscal year. And then it also declares the legislature's intent to provide an additional $2.1 billion in 23-24 and $875 million in 24-25. This is all general fund money. It's cash available now for the 22-23 year, sitting in our account ready to give out. So we're bringing these amendments forward to find a mechanism to provide cash quickly to school districts without going through our current priority funding process that we have now. We don't need to wait for general bond sales. So this, we're hoping, will streamline the ability, eliminate the priority funding process for non-bond fund monies. And we're going back to more of a direct apportionment model that was similar to what we had in the past for new construction modernization projects. There's also language in the amendments that would subject projects to all the regular program processing that we do now. For those of you unfamiliar with our current process for funding projects, we use a priority funding concept to provide cash to shovel-ready projects, and it's a two-step process. OPSC is processing applications in-house, and they're presented to the board, and we give them an unfunded approval, where they sit for a couple months, and they participate. School districts participate twice a year in our priority funding process, once in May and once in November. And in that priority funding process, the school districts are certifying they are ready to submit a valid fund release authorization, meaning they have construction contracts for at least half the project that are binding under contract, and they would like to request cash from the next bond sale available. Generally, bond sales happen in fall and spring following those May and November participation rounds, and then we give apportionments, and school districts have 90 days to submit a fund release request, with a few exceptions for our current other programs like Career Technical Facilities Program and Charter. The priority funding process was created back in 2008 when the state was going through a fiscal crisis. Previously, the board was able to give direct apportionments, and school districts had 18 months to request a fund release. It happened in the background, but the OPSC staff would request money from the Pooled Money Investment Board if we did not have cash from bond sales. But with the fiscal crisis, that option was no longer available to us. Soon after the fiscal crisis started, cash was made available to our program in limited amounts, but not enough to fund everybody. And what we were directed to do by the Pooled Money Investment Board and Finance and Treasurer's Office was find a way to give out cash quickly. So the State Allocation Board created a subcommittee back around 2008, and we took about 2/3 of the money we were given at the time, and we gave out money to projects that were left stranded when the fiscal crisis hit suddenly. The remaining cash, though, we did a trial round for the priority funding process, which worked pretty successfully. And following that, we created regulations to make it permanent. And with that priority funding process, like I mentioned, school districts opt in to participate, and they're asking for sales from a future bond sales. So there could be a few months lag, up to about 9 months usually, before they actually get cash. But with this general fund proceeds available to us now, we don't have to wait and do that long process. as soon as OPSC processes the application, we can give an apportionment now. The problem we currently are trying to address right now, though, school districts still have up to 18 months to request an apportionment. And right now, the board only provides those apportionments for 18 months if a school district appeals. We like to speed up that process to get cash out the door, so it's not just sitting there, potentially for projects that would not move forward. So what we've done on page 3 of the item is kind of summarize what our proposal is in that chart in the center there. And what we'd like to do is slide up the 18-month deadline to 6 months or 180 days for projects that aren't requesting financial hardship funding. So a little bit longer than our current 90-day process, but not as long as our current 18-month process that still exists. For school districts that are financial hardship and requesting financial hardship funding because they are not able to contribute their full contribution, we're proposing 365 calendar days from the date of apportionment to request a fund release. All the other program requirements will be the same as is. You still be required to do your grant agreement in advance. You would still need binding contracts for 50% of your project. We are just changing the due date that you have. And we try to hit kind of a middle ground. We recognize, especially if we're trying to kick this in quickly, that school districts might not have enough warning. We also want to need enough, we try to allocate enough planning time in there from a timing standpoint, that if you were to get an apportionment, say in October, you can still time your project contracting to either begin during the winter or if we start in October, you get your apportionment, your 90 to 60 months would be somewhere around April, May. That would give you enough time to plan your contracts for a summer construction project too. So we try to give a little bit of flexibility there for school districts that haven't started that process yet. And school districts that have financial hardship, that 1 year should give you more coordination ability throughout the year. At the bottom of page 3, we call it, we have about $400 million in bond authority, new construction modernization after the August board meeting. That money will quickly run out at the pace OPSC is processing applications, but it won't be completely out, we think, by the time these regulations would be approved. So there will be an overlap between Prop 51 money and residual bond proceeds and this general fund money. From an equity standpoint, we think it's fair to continue processing applications in date order received and use up that bond authority first. We anticipate that running out somewhere authority list. So we use bond money first, date order received, and then on to the general fund proceeds. In between there, number 2, what we also proposing is that we have a few facility hardship projects in the house. Those would be the exception to the date order received. We would propose those use general fund money, being health and safety projects. That'll get them cash. Currently, for the ones in-house, approximately 6 months earlier than the normal priority funding process. They wouldn't have to wait for that spring bond sale, assuming the bond sale happens as usual in the around March, April timeframe. So the impact of that timing, we do have a chart on page 50, the last page of our board item. We created attached to kind of show how the timing will work from a direct apportionment model versus the current priority funding model. So you can see how the timing works out for school districts that choose to participate in priority funding right away versus those that choose to take a non-participation occurrence. You'll see the cash gets out a little bit faster each month. And depending on when your project receives an unfunded approval, normally it could be substantially earlier. So one of the impacts we get questions out is 6 months enough. Based on our research for the projects currently on the application received beyond bond authority, it looks like about 89% of those projects are reimbursements or projects that already started. So we don't think the 180 days will be a challenge to those school districts. For financial hardship school districts, about 11% of the requests currently on our list are for financial hardship school districts. Based on the last couple of priority funding rounds, we have yet to have a financial hardship project that had a challenge in meeting their prior 90-day deadlines. So extending them to 365, not having advance notice, we recognize they may need cash to move forward and may not have used bridge financing, that they may need extra coordination time. So we're proposing the 365 for them just to make sure we don't impact them too much. But again, still less than the 18-month timeline. One other amendment that you'll see on our proposed regulations, we are recommending that cash receipt that is returned to the program. So we get cash received from CT loans, from rescissions, withdrawn projects over the course of time, closeout reductions. We're proposing that any funds return back to the program that is just cash. We don't need to wait for a bond sale for that. So we're including in our proposed regulations to roll that cash into these regulations as well, so that we can give that money out right away. Currently, it sits in our accounts until we have another priority funding round to start funding in date order received. So that'll get rid of that excess cash for us as well. Let's see. And I think with that, those are all the main concepts that we wanted to present. I'll open up for questions if anyone has anything or clarifications. And again, just use the raise hand feature in Zoom under you click your more button to raise your hand. Perfect, right? No questions?
Michael, you did phrase up a little bit on the order of funding with
sure.
bond authority. You might want to just go through the bond authority versus general fund and health and safety just real briefly and make sure everybody caught that.
Oh yeah, I can do that. Sorry about that. So as we're processing current projects right now, we have about 400 million left in bond authority for Prop 51 after the August board meeting projects are presented. At the pace OPSC is processing projects, we will run out somewhere this fall. When these regulations are approved also somewhere this fall, that means we'll have a slight overlap in bond authority available and general fund monies. So there becomes a decision that we need to make on who gets money first. If people participate in the priority funding process and they get Prop 51 money, they will not likely get cash until spring of 2023. But the general fund money will be given out right away as early as October or December. So they're going to get cash 3 to 4 months earlier. While there is a small time gap in their difference that projects lower down the list may get cash first, we still think it's important to maintain date order processing of our projects. So what we're proposing there in bullet 1 on the bottom page 3 is continue date order processing. If there's bond authority available, we will give projects the bond authority first. And as soon as we run out of bond authority somewhere around this fall, October, December board meetings, the projects after the bond authorities run out will start to receive the general fund cash. The one exception would be for health and safety projects that we have in-house now and continuing forward. We propose that all health and safety projects get general fund cash first right away. They're already prioritized by the board at the top of the unfunded list to receive cash proceeds from bond sales. We're continuing that concept for the general fund money as well. And being health and safety, we think it's important to get them cash as soon as possible, that we have, given that it's just sitting there in our account at the moment. So that's what we're proposing at the moment.
Good morning, Michael.
Hey, Greg.
Quick question. So the $1.3 billion, will it be apportioned on a date order received, regardless of whether or not it's new construction, modernization, or CTE, or will it be confined to just new construction and modernization?
The 1.3 billion was specific in AB 181 for just new construction modernization projects. We will continue the date order process though. Date order received for processing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. And a question in chat, will we have any direct portion effects on the pace which we approve applications? Unfortunately, no. And the bill, AB 181 was specific that it is intended in the legislature that OPSC maintains its current processing capabilities. We did not get extra staffing with the extra money. So we would continue at the same pace we are moving at now. You'll still get your 90-day notification that we're going to begin processing your application. That'll still occur. If you're doing the math from today, if we start notifying districts now, the new construction projects, if you don't turn in your eligibility updates right away, that's going to push you out to the full 6 months, possibly for a processing standpoint. But we're going to presume that some people are ready. And so there will be a little bit of date out. We will assign them and start working on them in date order received, but they might go to the board in a slightly different order, depending on how fast people turn back in their eligibility updates. Given that modernization projects don't have to do that, they might end up modernization projects getting apportionments first come October, December-ish. It just depends on how responsive school districts are to our notifications. Kelly asked a question, will the Arbor resolution still be required? That's referring to all projects that submit right now are getting placed on the application received beyond bond authority list. And knowing that you're going to be put on that list currently, you're required to submit a school board resolution acknowledging that you're being put on that list, and there isn't currently a guarantee of funds. Right now, the AB 181 gave the program only 1.3 billion. Currently, the Arbor List has 3.7 billion in projects. So at the moment, I believe we will still require that school board resolution. The legislature did indicate their intent to allocate the 2.1 billion from the general fund for our 2023-2024 fiscal year. But until that budget is actually approved and we actually receive that allocation, we haven't been given the cash for this program. They've only signified their intent for the next 2 fiscal years. So I think at the moment we would still require that resolution to be required, as long as the Arbor List is as big as it is right now. Other questions? Walter's question, whether the projects covered by the 1.3 billion be moved up the list. From a mechanics standpoint, possibly, yeah, we might be able to do that and put them onto our workload list officially and move them up to the other published list. That's more of a just from a publication standpoint, but yeah, we can take a look at that and see where that line would fall, so people can start planning ahead if they're within that 1.3 billion. We haven't done that math quite yet, but we can look at that. The Arbor List is published in the back of our agenda each month, though, so anyone doing the math, it is sorted by new construction and modernization, so you should be able to draw a line lightly of what the 1.3, how far that is should go. Just keep in mind, if you are doing that, every year we do those numbers published on the application received beyond bond authority list are based on the dollar amounts at the time the application was submitted. So they haven't been reviewed by OPSC, and it doesn't account for any potential grant changes as a result of CCI adjustments. Other questions? As you're thinking of questions, just a few notes on our planned next steps. We intend to allow continued feedback through August 4th. That's this Thursday at noon. If you have questions that you'd like to submit, we have an email address in the board item or the agenda item on the bottom of page 6 there. We will be publishing the board agenda probably early next week. If you'd like to be notified when that board item is published, our email subscription list address is in the item as well. You can also get to it from our webpage under the Contact Us link. That way, if there are any changes that are submitted, they will be incorporated into the item to address those comments received if needed. Otherwise, you'll see our final published item to the board with that publication with the full agenda next week. Question from Christopher on chat. Will this have an effect on OPSC Online? There should not be any impact in OPSC Online. You still do the same submittal process. We still process it exactly the same. The only thing that happens different really in the background from OPSC's perspective is the fund codes we're using. If you're familiar with our fund codes, a lot of those fund codes start with a 9 to indicate unfunded approval. We also have special conditions on the bottom of your funding shells indicating which proposition you're being funded from, and if you're being placed on the unfunded list. The projects that receive a direct apportionment will not have that 9 before the fund code. Additionally, you'll have different special conditions at the bottom of your shell funding item, indicating what your 180 days or 365 due date is for your 5005. But you'll still be able to do grant agreements. You'll still be able to do the 5005 submittals online. The general funded projects, you won't need to do that PIF cert link though in OCC Online. You can skip that process and just create a link to 5005 for submittal of those. And we would anticipate, just like our regular priority funding process, we will do plenty of notifications in advance, reminding you of the upcoming 5005 due dates and not missing those. I did fail to mention, with the direct apportionment model, we would not have the non-participation penalties that we currently have in regs. For those school districts that participate in priority funding right now, you're allowed to skip participation from a bond sale once. If you do it again, then your project rescinded, your application be revoked, and we return it to you, and you'd have to resubmit if you want funding for your projects. Under the direct apportionment model, you have your 6 months or 365 days. We would rescind without board action. We would not put you back on any unfunded list. We would process your application, take you to the board, give you cash. If you miss your 5005 window, we would rescind your project without board action. So that's another important note there. Other questions? All right. I think that wraps it up. If you do have follow-up questions, again, on the bottom page 6 is our communication team email address. You can email comments, questions to that address. If you are proposing any changes to the item or OPSC's recommendations, we would appreciate it by August 4th at 12 p.m. to that address, so that we have time to address it if needed. If there are no substantial concerns, we'll plan to present the item at the August 15th board meeting. But if we do get something substantial, we can revisit that and possibly hold another stakeholder meeting if necessary, depending on what it is. All right. Thank you everyone for your time. We appreciate it. And we'll see you at the board meeting.